Welcome to Still Unanswered. I'm Mara Ellison. Tonight, we're returning to a case, one that for many people in Columbus and beyond still hangs like a question mark in a camera frame. It's the disappearance of Brian Shaffer, a 27-year-old medical student who walked into a bar on the night of March 31st, 2006, and officially was never seen again. This episode is somber, reflective, and quietly eerie. We will move carefully through the facts we have and the spaces between them.
Thanks, Mara. I'm Colin Herrera. As a former missing persons analyst, this is one of those cases that really tests the limits of what surveillance can and cannot tell us. There's a surveillance image, one clear frame, that becomes the whole hinge of the mystery. And yet, all of the usual follow-up evidence you'd expect, phone records that place someone on the move, physical traces, a body, none of that materialized. It's strange. You feel the absence almost as a presence.
Yeah, so to set the stage, Brian Randall Shaffer was born February 11th, 1979 in Pickerington, Ohio. He was 27 the night he disappeared. He'd been a microbiology undergrad at Ohio State and was a second-year medical student at OSU's College of Medicine. Friends described him as sociable, reliable, someone who loved music, especially Pearl Jam, and who played guitar. He had an upper right arm tattoo, often described simply as a Pearl Jam tattoo, a little stick figure logo. Small details, but they matter when someone is trying to remember what a person looked like.
Right. And in the weeks before his disappearance, a large portion of his life was colored by grief. Brian's mother, Renee, had died in early March 2006 after a long illness. She'd had a rare blood disorder. Sources vary on the exact medical label, but the family was profoundly shaken. Friends said Brian was more introspective and, in some accounts, drinking a bit more. That context, loss on top of the pressures of medical school, shows up in the list of theories we'll talk about later. It doesn't answer anything, but it does complicate the picture.
And he had plans. He was in a serious relationship with Alexis Wagner, also a Met student. They had a trip to Miami booked for April 3rd, just a few days after he vanished. Some people close to him said he was planning to propose on that trip. Now, that's never been documented as an absolute fact, but it's part of why family and friends found the idea of him disappearing voluntarily hard to believe. He seemed future-oriented. He had a life already laid out, or at least a life he was moving toward.
Let's walk through the night itself, minute by minute, where we can. It begins with a dinner that many have pointed to as the last calm family moment. Brian met his father Randy for dinner on the evening of March 31st, often reported as an Outback steakhouse. Randy later described Brian as tired, emotionally worn from the months of his mother's illness, and focused on studies. That dinner, in retrospect, is one of those last ordinary scenes, father and son, before the timeline fractures.
After dinner, Brian called his brother Derek around 9 or so and invited him out. Derek declined. That phone call is the last time Derek spoke to Brian. Around 9 to 10 that night, Brian met up with a friend, Clint Florence, former roommate, and they headed toward the South Campus Gateway along High Street. They went out to the Ugly Tuna Saloona, then bar hopped with friends. There were free shots that night. It was the start of spring break, and the bars were busy. By late night, people who were there say Brian and Clint were fairly intoxicated.
At about 1:15 a.m., CCTV captures Brian, Clint, and a friend, Meredith Reed, on the escalator leading to the Ugly Tuna entrance. This is important because the building's layout makes that escalator the primary, highly monitored public entrance, something we'll return to. Inside, a band was playing, the bar was crowded with students, and the atmosphere was chaotic in that familiar late-night way. Then, at roughly 1:55 a.m., the footage that becomes central to every retelling shows Brian talking to two young women near the top of that escalator. He's relaxed, he says goodbye, turns, and walks out of frame, back toward the bar. That is the last confirmed image.
And then, 2 a.m., last call. The staff begin to close. Clint and Meredith leave the bar without Brian, assuming he's gone to the restroom or stepped out to talk to someone. No one records seeing him leave via the main monitored entrance, the escalator. The security footage shows him entering and moving around, but nothing shows him exiting. Detective Andre Edwards later said, and I'm quoting the reports here, that after repeated review, investigators could say with 100% certainty Brian did not leave via the main escalator captured on camera. That certainty about that specific exit creates the basic mystery. Where did he go from that frame?
Exactly. When you have a building with multiple cameras and your single definitive frame doesn't show the exit, your mind goes to alternate routes. In the Ugly Tuna, there was a service door not open to patrons, leading into a first-floor service corridor. That corridor linked to a construction area with its own exterior exit. The route was poorly lit, full of obstacles, and would have been difficult to navigate even sober. Surveillance in those areas was partial, panning cameras, manual operation, blind spots. So investigators explored that theory. Maybe he left through a back route. But the physical search afterwards didn't find a conclusive trace.
Investigators, police, and volunteers searched rooftops, maintenance shafts, HVAC tunnels, stairwells, service corridors, and even the basement and garage areas. There are reports, less official, more part of the case's oral lore, of a single footprint in a dusty stairwell, roughly matching Brian's shoe size. But that footprint didn't lead anywhere. It's been reported in coverage, but there's no public verification that it was definitively linked to Brian. After exhaustive searches of the building and nearby spaces, police found no blood, no clothing, no personal effects, no physical evidence of a violent struggle inside the property.
Beyond the building, searches expanded outward. Volunteers and family searched nearby construction sites, dumpsters, vacant lots. Police used scent dogs, and they even searched portions of the Columbus sewer system. The family, Randy and Derek, spent a great deal of time searching the Olentangy riverbanks, partly guided by a psychic's tip. They wore waders, combed the shallows, looking for any sign. Those are very human actions. Desperation manifest as physical searching. But those searches, too, yielded nothing.
For months, the disappearance looked like something between two categories. Either he'd vanished voluntarily, or he'd been taken or suffered an accident in a way that left no trace. There was no voicemail, no credit card or passport activity, no verified financial trail that suggested he'd started a new life. He left his car at his apartment on King Avenue, about 6 blocks from the bar. Friends and family kept calling his phone. Alexis, in particular, became a vigil, calling the number nightly just to hear the voicemail. And then, in September 2006, months after he disappeared, she called and the phone rang 3 times before going to voicemail. That was the most chilling, hopeful, and confusing single moment in the case's digital record.
Right. The provider at the time, Singular, told investigators that the 3 rings could have been a network glitch, or it could indicate the phone was active and connected to a tower. The record showed a cell tower ping in Hilliard, Ohio, about 14 miles northwest of Columbus, associated with that call. Now, it's crucial to note there was no confirmed sighting of Brian in Hilliard, and the ping could be explained by network routing oddities. But because the phone itself never turned up, the ping remains one of those ghostly data points, something that hints at activity without being definitive. It fueled hope, and it also created more questions.
There were other leads over the years, tips from across the country and even internationally, sightings in Michigan, Texas, Sweden, and a 2019 photo of a bearded man in Tijuana that some internet users thought resembled Brian. The Columbus police sent that image to the FBI, and facial recognition analysis concluded it was not him. Those false leads are part of what turns a missing person case into a public mythology. Everyone wants to find the person, but many leads don't withstand scrutiny.
We should also talk about the people closest to Brian. because missing person investigations are as much about relationships as they are about location data. Clint Florence spent most of the night with Brian and cooperated initially, gave statements and participated in searches. But he refused to take a polygraph test, which others close to Brian did. Clint's attorney later said there was no need for a polygraph and that Clint had told everything he knew. Nonetheless, Clint's refusal to take the test and his continued presence in the case as an ambiguous figure has fueled suspicion and resentment, especially from Derek and Alexis, who've said they think Clint knows more than he's told.
And then there's Randy and Derek Bryan's father and brother. Randy channeled grief into searching. He consulted private investigators, followed leads, even consulted psychics. Randy tragically died in 2008 in a storm-related accident when a tree fell on his home. I mean, he never knew what happened to his son. After his obituary, an anonymous post appeared online. "Dad, I love you. Brian, U.S. Virgin Islands." Investigators traced that to a public computer and declared it a hoax. That kind of cruelty, false hope, added another layer of injury to the family's mourning.
I want to pause and note something here for our listeners. Suspicion and rumor can inflict real harm. When a case is unsolved, people fill the void with interpretations. Some come from grief, some from anger, some from internet sleuthing. But suspicion doesn't equal proof. Derek believes strongly that Brian would not have left on purpose. Alexis, for a long time, called the phone every night to hear the voicemail. Those are human reactions to an absence that refuses to be explained. They're important to acknowledge because they guide how families live afterward.
Let's turn to theories. There are several commonly discussed, and fair warning, they're all speculative in different ways. First, voluntary disappearance. The argument here is that Brian, overwhelmed by grief, his mother's recent death, and by the pressure of med school, might have chosen to walk away and start over. There are investigators who said leaving on his own was plausible. He'd been drinking, he was exhausted, but the counterpoints are strong. He left his car, his wallet and credit cards didn't show activity, he had an imminent trip to Miami with Alexis, and those close to him argue he wouldn't have done that to them. So voluntary disappearance remains a theory, but not one everyone accepts.
Second, abduction or foul play. The idea here is someone exploited a blind spot, service corridors, construction exits, or an opportunistic predator acted in the chaos of closing time. The Gateway area had crime in its past, which explains the heavy surveillance. A crowded bar at 2 a.m. is noisy and chaotic. People are less likely to notice a struggle. But this theory collides with another reality. Investigators and volunteers performed extensive searches and found no blood, no clothing, no signs of a violent struggle. If there had been a violent attack in or near the bar, the absence of forensic trace is unusual. It doesn't rule the possibility out, but it complicates it.
Third, accidental death, fall, medical emergency, or misadventure. Maybe Brian used the service door, stumbled into a hazardous construction area, and fell where initial searches missed him. Maybe he walked toward water, slipped into the Olentangy River, and drowned. Maybe, while sleep-deprived and intoxicated, he suffered a medical episode and collapsed in a hard-to-search spot. Each of these scenarios is plausible in isolation, but the counter-argument is that construction completed, the building was used and renovated over years, and if a body had been in a place where day-to-day building activity proceeded, you'd expect discovery. Still, these accidental scenarios remain on the table because they don't require purpose or malevolence, just a tragic chain of events.
Fourth, the more speculative or internet-driven hypotheses, like the so-called smiley face killer theory. Some online communities have tried to fit Brian's disappearance into broader patterns of young men disappearing near water. Law enforcement and the FBI have rejected the smiley face killer as a coherent serial killer theory. Columbus police don't see evidence linking Brian to any serial pattern. This is a good example of how myth-making can try to impose a pattern where one might not exist. It's understandable. Humans seek patterns. But we need to be careful about conflating wishful narratives with evidence.
And then there's the eerie fan theory, that he never left the bar at all, that he died inside and was concealed. It's haunting to imagine a body hidden in a back room or storage area for years. But the building was searched thoroughly. Ugly Tuna operated for years, and buildings rarely hide a body without anyone noticing odor or some sign during renovations or routine work. So while that theory is atmospheric, it lacks the kind of heart support we look for.
Mara, can I?
Yeah, go ahead, Colin.
I want to underscore something about the surveillance paradox you mentioned earlier. We often equate more cameras with more certainty. Brian's case shows how that can be false. One camera captured him at 1:55 a.m., but surveillance is only as good as its angles and coverage. Many blind spots remain: service doors, stairwells, maintenance corridors, areas not designed with patrons in mind. So the presence of cameras gave investigators confidence about where he didn't go, the escalator, but not about where he might have. That gap between visibility and safety becomes almost philosophical in cases like this.
Absolutely, and it feeds into a deeper theme. What we call surveillance is not the same as rescue. Cameras can record, but they don't prevent everything. They don't substitute for physical presence or intervention. Brian's disappearance makes that painfully clear. Now, let's talk about the investigative tensions. People like Clint, Alexis, Randy, Derek. Clint refused a polygraph. His attorney said he told everything he knew. Derek and Alexis have both expressed doubts about Clint's full disclosure. That kind of interpersonal distrust is common when a case goes cold. People want answers, and when they're not forthcoming, your relationship's fray. But again, suspicion is not evidence.
And we need to take care in how we talk about that. The case has been subject to public scrutiny for nearly 2 decades. Online sleuths have tried to parse CCTV frames, reconstruct timing, examine lighting and clothing. That can be useful. Crowd attention sometimes generates tips, but it also risks descending into harassment or false accusations. For instance, the hoax post after Randy's death, Brian, U.S. Virgin Islands, was malicious. Investigators traced it to a public computer and labeled it a hoax. These acts prolong family suffering. So there's an ethical responsibility in public engagement. Stay curious, but be kind.
We should also cover the official status of the case today. The Columbus Police and the Ohio Attorney General list Brian as missing. The FBI VICAP program has his file. In 2021, the Ohio Attorney General released an age-progressed image of what Brian might look like at 42, and authorities continue to welcome tips. There are, by some accounts, 4 boxes of investigative material. The work has been extensive, but inconclusive. And as of the most recent public reporting, there are no confirmed sightings or remains. The case remains open.
Mara, can I ask you, how has the passage of time changed the way people talk about Brian's disappearance? Public memory can be merciless in its forgetting, but this one, because of that security frame, keeps cropping up. What do families say about living without resolution?
Great question, Colin. Derek has said that he still struggles with whether to hold hope or accept a grim outcome. It's like living in a suspended state, unable to fully grieve because there's always the possibility, however remote, that the person might reappear. Alexis moved on with her life, but kept that ritual of calling the phone at night for months. Randy died without answers. This frozen grief is different from grief with a body and a funeral. It's a slow erosion of stability. Every new false lead is either a faint warmth of hope or a shove that re-traumatizes the family. That's why cases like this linger in families for decades.
And there's a societal angle, too. We think of late-night urban spaces, bars, concerts, nightlife, as places of risk, but also of community and relief. When someone vanishes from that liminal space, it raises questions about how we design those environments,
lighting, staffing, access control, and how we support people who are mentally and physically exhausted. We can analyze CCTV and cell pings, but the human context, the fatigue, grief, social intoxication, stitches those technical details into a lived moment. That's where prevention would ideally meet empathy if we were designing systems to keep people safe.
Before we move toward a close, let's walk the listeners through a few of those audio scenes to help imagine what the night sounded like, just as a way to inhabit the case without sensationalizing it. Picture the bar interior, muffled rock music, a band playing, the clink of glasses, laughter, drunk voices. The lights go up at last call, chairs scrape, staff voices calling last call. An escalator camera whirs, soft mechanical clicks as the footage replays a single frame from 1:55 a.m. A ringtone in the distance, Alexis's ritual call, rings 3 times months later, then goes to voicemail. And at the river, the sound of waders moving, flashlight beams cutting through black water, the river's low rush. These are not dramatic sound cues. They are ordinary noises layered over an extraordinary absence.
Mara, could you recap very briefly the core anchors for listeners who might want to follow up or submit a tip? Just the hard dates and the specific factual items to keep in mind.
Sure. Brian Shaffer, born February 11th, 1979. Night of March 31 into April 1, 2006. Dinner with his father, then a night out with friends. Last confirmed CCTV image at about 1:55 a.m. at the Ugly Tuna Saloona near the OSU South Campus Gateway. Bar closing around 2 a.m. He was not seen leaving via the main monitored escalator entrance. He failed to appear for a planned Miami trip on April 3rd. Alexis's phone call in September 2006 rang 3 times before voicemail. A cell tower ping associated with that call was recorded in Hilliard, Ohio. No body, no confirmed financial trail, no verified sightings since. The case remains open. If people have tips, they should contact the Columbus Police or the Ohio Attorney General's Missing Persons Unit. Those are the official channels.
Thanks. And if I can add one investigative point, the most useful information in a cold case often comes from mundane details. The memory of a stranger leaving with someone, a delivery truck recorded on camera at 2 a.m., a maintenance worker who remembers a loud noise. So my plea is straightforward. If you were in that area that night and your memory is faint, revisit it. Small details matter. Also, consider how technology has changed. Older cell data is sometimes reinterpreted with modern tools. So even if you thought it was nothing back then, it might be something now.
Colin, one last ethical note before we wrap. Cases like Brian's ask listeners to hold 2 things at once: the hunger for answers and the need for compassion. We can be curious, we can theorize, but we must remember there are people who carry the living weight of not knowing. Speculation is easy. Tenderness takes effort. I always find myself wanting to remind people that in the silence that follows a disappearance, the family's need for dignity is paramount.
Amen to that. And to anyone listening who might have a tip, no matter how small, please reach out to the Columbus Police. Follow official channels, and if you're engaging on forums, be mindful. Wrong accusations hurt real people. Keep it curious, keep it kind.
To close, we'll return to the image that never stops replaying for many. Brian at 1:55 a.m., casual, perhaps tired, talking to 2 women near the top of an escalator. It's a small, ordinary moment suspended forever. He turned, walked out of frame, and then everything else went quiet. There's an age-progressed image released in 2021 that authorities have circulated, but as of now, nothing has broken the case open in a way that gives the family finality. The questions remain. Did he walk away? Was there an accident? Was foul play involved? We don't know. We still have to live with the not knowing.
If this episode leads even one person to review old memories, or to hand a police detective a small overlooked detail, then it's worth it. The work of solving a missing person case is often slow and very granular. It's not dramatic. Mostly it's patient, sometimes tedious work across years. But it can matter.
Thank you for listening. I'm Mara Ellison. This has been Still Unanswered. If you have information about Brian Shaffer, please contact Columbus Police or the Ohio Attorney General's Missing Persons Unit. Be kind in your conversations about this case. Next week, we'll return with another story. Different corners of the same long shadow that unresolved disappearances cast. Until then, take care of each other.
Good night, everyone.